Hello there, watching Al24 Midnight News and to the headlines. Senegalese president praised the personal commitment of the Algerian president on vital African matters as well as his interest in infrastructure development. President of the African Parliament 14 Charambera arrived in Sahrawi refugee camps as part of a visit to the Sahrawi Republic. While Russia gained significant success in Bakhmut, Western allies have pledged more support to Ukraine after President Vladimir Zelensky called for sophisticated weapons. And after Madagascar finished third in the African tournament, Algeria, the host, is preparing for an epic final against Senegal this Saturday evening at Nelson Mandela Stadium. Starting from Algeria, Senegalese President Macky Sall praised Thursday in Dakar the personal commitment of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, regarding essential African issues and his interest in developing facilities and infrastructure at the national and continental levels. Speaking during a meeting granted to Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdulrahman on the sidelines of his participation in his capacity as a representative of the President of the Republic in the proceedings of the Second African Infrastructure Financing Summit, Macky Sall also highlighted the significant support provided by Algeria for the African continent. Still in Africa, President of the African Parliament 14 Charambera arrived in the Sahrawi refugee camps as part of a visit to the Sahrawi Republic, during which he will meet with a number of Sahrawi officials. Upon his arrival to Smara, he was received by Sahrawi officials. Meanwhile, the head of the African Parliament is due to be received Saturday morning by the Speaker of the Algerian Council of the Nation, Saleh Goujil. On Friday, the president of the Polisario Front, Brahim Maghali, received the African Parliament President 14 Charambera at the presidency headquarters. The visit of the African Parliament President comes after the visit led by the chairman of a Peace and Security Commission of the African Union, which confirms the African support to Western Sahara.
Our organization works on African unity, and Western Sahara is a member of the African Union. We have agreed that the issue of Western Sahara is a real and a sincere issue that must be resolved. We will do everything we can to find a solution to it. We have raised the matter to African leaders to take it into account with the United Nations.
Still in the African continent, the African National Congress, or the ANC, has called on the South African government to exclude Morocco from the African Union. ANC's call comes to denounce both Morocco's occupation of Sahrawi territories as well as Rabat's obvious violation of the Constitutive Act of the Union, to which it is a participant country, as well as international law and internationally agreed borders, with the aim of seizing new territories by force. President of the Spanish government, Pedro Sanchez, reiterated once again Spain's position towards the Western Sahara conflict, which supports the Morocco autonomy plan, arousing strong criticism inside and outside government. Both his partners from Unidas Podemos and the opposition criticized the head of the government for the turnaround in the Spanish policy towards Western Sahara. The head of the United Nations Support Mission in Libya, Abdullah Batili, agreed with President of the Presidential Council in Libya, Mohammed Al-Manfi, on the need to achieve a Libyan consensus that lead to holding comprehensive elections during the current year. At the time, the media office of the Libyan Presidential Council confirmed in a statement that Al-Manfi and Batili discussed serious ideas to complete the elections as soon as possible. The transitional government in Burkina Faso announced a new action plan to combat terrorism and achieve stability in the country. The action plan for stability and development will continue until organization of elections scheduled for 2024. It includes several axes, most notably the comprehensive reconciliation and rebuilding of the state. Now coming back to Algeria, the Algerian Sonatrach Group intends to raise production in the oil fields of the Touggourt region south of the country to 80,000 barrels per day by 2026 as part of a package of accelerated steps aimed at increasing Algeria's production of gas and oil by the end of 2023. Morab Al-Awer on what's follow.
Giant group Sonatrach launches a strategic plan to raise its production of crude oil to 60,000 barrels per day from about 18 new fields during 2023. The oil giant set a goal to achieve a production capacity of approximately 80,000 barrels per day by the year 2026. It is aiming to enhance its production capabilities from the oil fields in southern Algeria, specifically in Touggourt city, as well as to exploit the high prices of oil in the global markets.
The oil field has approximately 18 new discoveries in this area that began to be exploited in an accelerated manner. In 2016, we started with nearly 5,000 barrels per day, while today, and with the continuous drilling of wells, we reached a production of 45,000 barrels per day. Our goal is to reach about 60,000 barrels by next July, and also to work to reach more than 1,000 barrels per day.
The president and CEO of Algeria's giant Sonatrach revealed the company's intention to raise production capacity of Birsba complex to nearly 40,000 barrels. The complex includes Sonatrach Group and two other foreign companies.
The complex is a partnership between Sonatrach, a Thai company, and another Vietnamese company. Birsba currently produces a capacity of approximately 20,000 barrels per day. It produces about 16,500 barrels per day. It has the possibility to raise production to approximately 40,000 barrels. We are working with a foreign company in order to make a decision as soon as possible and move immediately into increased production.
A package of accelerated steps by Africa's giant Sonatrach to exploit the newly discovered oil fields aims to boost Algeria's oil and gas production and to enhance its exports in the energy market as an important and reliable resource.
Algeria led the world in the value of oil and gas discoveries, recording its strongest performance in more than a decade last year. A recent report by the American research company Wood Mackenzie showed that the largest investments in global oil and gas discoveries were pumped in Namibia, in addition to Algeria and many new discoveries in Brazil during the past year. The report showed that the global exploration sector added about $33 billion last year through new oil and gas discoveries at a price of $60 per barrel compared to approximately $5 billion in 2021. Now moving on to the Middle East. The Zionist occupation forces renewed its offensives on the besieged Gaza Strip, with media sources saying that the bombing targeted sites of the Palestinian resistance factions. This latter announced a response to the air raids at a time when the occupation army arrested more than 20 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. More with Mohammed in this report.
Once again, Gaza has been the target of a series of missile strikes by the Zionist occupation army. Warplanes launched Thursday air raids on positions of the Palestinian resistance under the pretext of retaliating on a missile fired from the Gaza Strip. In the occupied West Bank, mass arrests have become a daily routine in an attempt to bring the resistance down, a resistance that top leaders of the Zionist entity see as a nightmare. More than 20 Palestinians were arrested Thursday by the occupation forces after storming several governorates in the occupied West Bank, most of them from Ramallah. The violations also continue in the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque. Dozens of settlers stormed the mosque under the protection of the occupation police. They carried out provocative tours and performed their Talmudic rituals in its courtyards. The occupation forces also resorted to starving the Palestinians in retaliation for their call in the United Nations to stop the aggression. Furthermore, in order to add to the Palestinian people's sufferings, the Netanyahu government imposed sanctions on the Palestinian Authority by deducting its tax revenues and transferring them to the benefit of the settlers. Meanwhile, Palestinian youngster Abdullah Samih Ahmed died on Friday evening after injuries he sustained when being shot by the Zionist occupation army near the Huwara military checkpoint south of Nablus. The killing of the 25-year-old Samih Ahmed brings the number of the Palestinian martyrs killed by the bullets of the Zionist soldiers since the beginning of this year to 36, including 8 children and an elderly woman.
Still with Palestine, European Union has announced granting €296 million financial aid to the Palestinian people. The granting of the financial package was signed on Thursday at the Palestinian presidency in Ramallah in the presence of President of the State of Palestine Mahmoud Abbas, Prime Minister Mohammed Shtaya, Minister of Finance Shukri Bishara, as well as heads of missions of the European Union. Turkey on Thursday slammed a group of Western countries that temporarily closed down the consulates in Istanbul over security concerns, accusing them of waging psychological warfare and attempting to wreck Turkey's tourism industry. Countries including Germany, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Switzerland temporarily closed diplomatic missions in Turkey, saying it was for security reasons. Turkish Foreign Minister suggested those countries may have been trying to portray Turkey as an unstable state.
No matter how you look at this situation, these statements from foreign consulates and closing actions are international. We have made the necessary warnings. If they continue such methods without sharing concrete information and documents with us, we will also take further steps.
In Russia-Ukraine conflict, during the joint press conference in Kiev with President Vladimir Zelensky, European Union officials have said Ukraine's future is in the EU. During the meeting, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU has pledged to double its military aid program for Ukraine. Nabil Khazini.
A show of unity and a show of support too. The objective number one behind this visit of EU leaders to Kiev was to promise more assistance to Ukraine, and the meeting was a chance for Kiev to ask for a speeding up in its bid to join the European Union.
Є розуміння, що почати
We have an understanding that it will be possible for Ukraine to start EU accession negotiation this year. There is also an understanding with our partners that this year, same as last year, we have to strengthen the defense support of our country and the pressure on Russia.
Шановні пані та панове,
But there is a long way to go. European leaders don't seem to agree whether Ukraine can join the EU. At the summit itself, there was no promise of fast-track membership, and the European Union's next package of sanctions on Russia, its 10th, is expected to fall short of Kiev's expectations.
There are no rigid timelines, but there are goals that you have to reach. Reforms, for example, to improve a situation in the candidate country, to then reach the accession negotiations and the accession itself.
To the north, where these Ukrainian forces stage firing drills close to Belarus border, a defensive line from a possible new confrontation zone. These tanks will soon be reinforced with other more sophisticated armored vehicles, and with some others older, like the Leopard 1 tanks, which would add to the raft of fighting vehicles Berlin promised last week, and which Ukraine demanded for its war that will enter in few weeks its second year. 80 years on, says President Putin, his forces are facing German tanks again.
Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas has threatened to boycott the Paris Olympics if Russian and Belarusian athletes are allowed to participate. The International Olympic Committee, the IOC, recently announced that the athletes from these two countries might be allowed to qualify for Olympics through Asian events. However, the IOC later said it was sticking to sanctions imposed on Russia and Belarus. Other countries like Latvia and Kiev have also threatened to boycott the Games, while Baltic and Polish sports ministers have called for a similar ban.
Our efforts should be on convincing our other friends and allies that participation of Russian and Belarusian athletes is just wrong. So boycotting is the next step, but I'm sure that people will understand why this is necessary to not let the Russian and Belarusian athletes compete, but the others will compete.
In a different matter now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken postponed his trip to China after Chinese spy balloon was tracked flying across the U.S., which U.S. officials called a clear violation of U.S. sovereignty. Blinken postponed the trip to avoid blowing the situation out of proportion, but also did not want the balloon incident to be the main topic during his meeting with Chinese officials. China expressed regret for civilian airships straying into U.S. territory and causing a political furor. The Pentagon said Friday that the Chinese balloon had moved eastward and was over the central United States, and that Washington rejected China's claims that it was not being used for surveillance.
The North American Aerospace Defense Command continues to monitor it closely. While we won't get into specifics in regards to the exact location, I can tell you that the balloon continues to move eastward and is currently over the center of the continental United States. Again, we currently assess that the balloon does not present a military or physical threat to people on the ground at this time, and will continue to monitor and review options.
In the same line of thought, Chinese authorities said Friday that suspect Beijing's operated spy balloon spotted hovering over sensitive U.S. airspace was in fact a civilian airship intended for scientific research. Spokesperson of Ministry of Foreign Affairs said at a daily briefing on Friday that the government is still verifying reports of the situation.
And right now,
China is a responsible country and has always strictly abided by international laws. China has no intention to violate the territory and airspace of any sovereign country. As for the balloon, as I've mentioned just now, we are looking into and verifying the situation and hope that both sides can handle this together calmly and carefully.
In Latin America, as protests continue, Peru's Congress rejected another proposal to hold elections this year, just one day after a similar proposal aimed at quelling deadly nationwide unrest failed. Hussein Burkan.
Peru's Congress once again rejected the proposal for early elections despite nationwide demonstrations. This latest bill included the possibility of a referendum or constitutional assembly.
This Congress will not be remembered as a prudent one that was at the level of the circumstances. But, President, we can't accept this bill.
President Dina Boluarte presented the bill earlier that day, urging representatives to approve it.
I only ask the representative, with due respect to them as the most important power of the government, to respond to the necessities of what the people are requesting, to call for early elections and for us all to leave.
Demonstrators took to the street of Lima again, continuing their push for early elections and a chance to vote for new government. Boluarte took office in December after the ousting of her predecessor Pedro Castillo for seeking to dissolve the legislature. The current administration will remain in power until 2026, unless early elections are approved. Boluarte has stated that the responsibility of approving a new round of voting lies solely with Congress.
My resignation is not at stake in this situation. There is a minority of the population. These groups, which generate violence and chaos in the country, they push for my resignation by blackmailing, but we are not going to give in to this political blackmail.
Protests continue nationwide, with demonstrators taking to the street of Costco, demanding Boluarte's resignation and a chance to vote on a new government. At least 58 people have died in protests since the ousting of Castillo. Despite nationwide protests and calls for early elections, Congress has rejected multiple bills for early elections. Boluarte remains in office, stating that her resignation is not up for negotiation and blaming a minority of a population for the ongoing violence and chaos in the country.
Coming up now to sports events, Madagascar finishes third in the African local tournament after defeating Niger 1-0 in the last minute. The game played at Milud Hadfi Stadium in Iran witnessed only one goal scored by Juan at the end of the game, which allowed the Malagasy team to claim the bronze medals with an impressive performance all along the tournament in which they participated for the first time. The Algerian national team for home-based players is preparing now to face the Teranga Lions of Senegal in the final game of the African tournament for local players this Saturday evening at Nelson Mandela Stadium in Algiers. The Desert Warriors, or Green Foxes, are looking to win the title of this competition for the first time in Algerian football history, whereas Senegal, who has been absent from this tournament since 2011, are also willing to claim their first golden medal, which makes this game's result unpredictable for both sides. It's worth mentioning that CAF President Patrice Motsepe will hold a press conference at 12 a.m. to talk about the tournament's final between Algeria and Senegal, with other matters to be highlighted as well. Wishing the best for our national team, and now all I can say, take care of yourself. Good night.